Have you ever stopped to consider that the very strategies that brought you your absolute biggest successes might actually be the exact things holding you back today? It's a pretty wild paradox, right? But in a rapidly changing world, past success can quickly become a massive liability if we cling to it just a little too tightly. And that brings us to the ultimate foundational question for today. What must we unlearn to evolve into a stronger, more adaptive, and future-ready organization?
Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so we spend a ton of time talking about learning, right? Acquiring new skills, pulling in new data, installing new software. But today, we're flipping the script. We are exploring a framework that tackles the absolutely crucial yet almost always overlooked process of unlearning. If you're a focused learner looking to drive real, tangible transformation either in yourself or your organization, you are exactly in the right place. We're going to explore how to intentionally dismantle the old just to make space for the new. Here is our organizational renovation blueprint for today. We'll be hitting 1. Why we must unlearn. 2. Targets for unlearning. 3. The unlearning strategy. 4. Overcoming resistance and barriers. And finally, 5. Tracking transformation and growth.
All right, let's jump straight into section 1. Why we must unlearn. The foundation and the cracks.
So, what's our actual objective here? Basically, it's a systematic process of identifying all those outdated beliefs, behaviors, and systems that just do not serve the organization's growth goals anymore. It's such a fascinating approach because it's literally about intentionally clearing out the organizational junk. Think about it. You absolutely cannot install a brand new operating system on a hard drive that's completely maxed out with outdated, corrupted files. You've got to hit delete first.
But how do we actually know when it's time to hit that delete button? Well, every unlearning journey starts with specific context. It's about pinpointing the area of change and your reason for reflection. But the real kicker here is the trigger event. Trigger events are those unexpected catalysts. Maybe it's a sudden massive shift in the market, a product launch that totally flopped, or some new disruptive technology that forces us to just pause and realize, wait a minute, our old way of doing this simply isn't working anymore. Moving right along to section 2, targets for unlearning, the demolition zone.
First up on the demolition block, mindsets. We have to take an outdated belief and figure out its origin. Like, where did this assumption even come from? But the real heavy lifting is explicitly articulating why it's no longer valid today, and crucially, we have to measure its business impact. What really stands out about this is how it takes a totally abstract concept, a belief, and ties it directly to the bottom line. Clinging to an old mindset isn't just, being stubborn. It actively costs the organization time, money, and agility.
And we've got to apply that exact same rapid-fire contrast to our daily processes. We look at a current practice, identify the problem it's causing, and then boom, we immediately match it with a replacement or redesign plan. It is not enough to just complain about a broken workflow around the water cooler. If you're marking a process for demolition, you must simultaneously design its replacement. You have to know exactly what you're building in its place.
Now, obviously, it's not just about processes on a whiteboard. Actually, leadership behaviors and those deep-rooted cultural habits, those are usually the absolute hardest things to tear down. The framework asks us to map out the negative consequences of these cultural roots and explicitly define the desired new habit. So say a leadership style relies heavily on micromanagement, which totally bottlenecks decision-making. That's your negative consequence. The desired new habit has to be actively defined and practiced. Because culture, it's really just a massive collection of habits, and bad habits have to be actively unlearned.
This whole idea totally extends to our systems and metrics too. We have to shine a light on the limitations of what we're currently tracking. Because let's face it, if you're measuring success using an outdated metric, you're literally going to drive outdated behavior. But notice this absolutely crucial addition, the owner. Rethinking our systems and finding an alternative approach, that won't just happen by magic. It requires assigning a specific person to champion that new metric.
Okay, before we completely leave the demolition zone, we have to do something super important. Look backwards to look forwards. Analyzing past mistakes is a vital target for unlearning. What was missed earlier must directly inform the change we implement today. If we don't unlearn the blind spots that tripped us up before, there is no way around it. We are guaranteed to build those exact same blind spots right into our new strategy.
Which perfectly cues up section 3, the unlearning strategy, the blueprint.
Our source material outlines 4 key focus areas to make a successful unlearning strategy happen: leadership, operations, culture, and customer engagement.
But to make this blueprint actually work in the real world, each of these 4 steps requires extreme specificity. For every single area, you've got to define the key action, the timeline, the responsible person, and the support needed. Without that level of detail, unlearning is just, a vague corporate wish. By attaching names, dates, and actual resources to these 4 pillars, it suddenly becomes a tangible, executable plan.
All right, let's look at the hazards in Section 4. Overcoming resistance and barriers, friction and hazards.
Look, let's be real. Unlearning is deeply, deeply uncomfortable. It causes a ton of friction. Here are the 4 exact barrier types from our source material that will undoubtedly slow down your pace. Psychological, structural, cultural, and leadership resistance. We really need to pause and acknowledge the heavy psychological weight here. Asking seasoned professionals to just abandon the tools and beliefs that made them successful in the first place, that feels deeply threatening. It honestly feels like a loss of competence. But recognizing these specific barriers is the very first step to disarming them.
So how do we actually disarm them? Simple. Treat them like any other standard business risk. Think about your own team for a second. You take each barrier type, whether that's a structural bottleneck or outright leadership resistance, describe it clearly, assess its actual severity, and then match it with a concrete mitigation plan. You can't just cross your fingers and hope the friction goes away. You have to engineer a strategy to actively lubricate the process and genuinely support your team through the discomfort of change.
And that leads us right into Section 5, Tracking Transformation and Growth, the final inspection.
This approach to tracking progress is incredibly straightforward, but man, is it effective. You literally just list the indicator, its description, the target date, and the current status. What this does is take all the messy emotion right out of the transformation. It gives you a highly visible, completely objective dashboard that tells everyone in the organization exactly where the unlearning process stands at any given moment. No guessing required.
And just to show you what this actually looks like in practice, the text highlights 3 critical examples of these indicators: the new behavior adoption rate, the number of process updates completed, and leadership transformation sessions held. These metrics serve as the ultimate, quantitative proof that our unlearning implementation plan is genuinely working. It proves we aren't just talking about change in endless meetings, we are actively measuring its arrival. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to turn these reflection questions straight from the source text directly over to you. Use this as a prompt for a quick, immediate self-assessment. Ask yourself right now, what outdated habits have slowed your growth? What is that old way of doing things that you're actively defending simply because it feels comfortable? Okay, now follow that up with a forward-looking question. Once you manage to clear away all that old debris, what new thinking patterns will drive your future success? See how that shifts your focus entirely? You move away from the demolition of the old, straight into the incredibly exciting construction of the new. Finally, I want to leave you with this absolute mic drop of a question straight from the text. To truly evolve and become future-ready, you have to make some hard choices. So look at your team, look at your organizational strategy, look at your own daily habits, and ask yourself, what must be permanently left behind? Take that question with you today. Go clear out the old, build your future, and hey, thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning and, of course, keep unlearning.